The jungle was screaming. Machine guns rattled, rifles cracked, grenades exploded in bursts of dirt and fire. Private Tommy Mitchell crouched behind a fallen tree somewhere in the Philippines, his finger white on the trigger of his M1 Garand. He'd been firing for 20 minutes straight, emptying magazine after magazine into the thick wall of green vegetation in front of him. But here's the thing. He hadn't actually seen a single Japanese soldier, not one. He was shooting at shadows, at sounds, at the idea of an enemy somewhere out there in the darkness. And he wasn't alone. During World War II, American forces fired an estimated 45,000 rounds of ammunition to kill just one enemy soldier. That's not a typo. 45,000 bullets for one death. If that sounds insane to you, you're starting to understand how war actually works. Because the dirtiest secret of World War II wasn't about tanks or planes or battleships. It was about the men holding the rifles and what they couldn't bring themselves to do. It's 1942. The United States has just entered the war. Millions of young men are being shipped across the Pacific and Atlantic to fight enemies they've never met. The Army assumes these soldiers will do what soldiers are supposed to do: aim, fire, kill. But then something strange starts happening. After battles, officers notice their men have barely touched their ammunition. Rifles are still loaded. Machine guns have fired only a handful of rounds. At first, the commanders think it's cowardice, but that's not it at all. These men are brave. They're running into enemy fire to save wounded friends. They're charging machine gun nests. They're dying for their country. They're just not shooting. Enter Brigadier General Samuel Lyman Atwood Marshall, better known as S.L.A. Marshall, or SLAM. He's a military historian assigned to interview soldiers right after combat, to figure out what actually happens when the bullets start flying. And what he discovers shocks everyone. Marshall interviews thousands of soldiers across dozens of battles, and he finds something impossible to believe. In any given firefight, only 15 to 25% of soldiers actually fire their weapons at the enemy. That means, out of every 100 men on the front line, 75 to 85 of them never pull the trigger. They don't run away. They don't hide. They help carry ammunition. They rescue the wounded. They risk their lives in every possible way. They just won't shoot another human being. Why? Because killing someone, even an enemy, goes against everything most humans are wired to do. From the time we're children, we're taught not to hurt people. Don't hit, don't fight, be kind. And then suddenly the government hands you a rifle and says, go kill strangers on the other side of the world. For most men, that switch doesn't flip. They can't do it. Their brains won't let them. So instead, they fire over the enemy's heads. They shoot into trees. They spray bullets wildly into the jungle, hoping the noise and chaos will be enough. And that's where those 45,000 rounds come in. Most bullets fired in World War II weren't aimed at anyone. They were fired to keep heads down, to create the illusion of violence, to suppress the enemy so the small percentage of soldiers who could actually kill would have time to do their job. The Pacific Theater was the worst. American platoons would be moving through dense jungle in places like Guadalcanal or the Philippines when suddenly, crack, a Japanese sniper fires. One shot, and then silence. The Americans have no idea where it came from. So what do? They unleash hell. Entire squads open fire. Machine guns roar. Rifles blast. Grenades get thrown. They spray thousands of rounds into the trees, the bushes, the undergrowth, hitting everything except the one sniper who's already moved to a new position. It's not strategy. It's panic, and it burns through ammunition like gasoline. The United States produced 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition during World War II. 47 billion. That's enough bullets to give every person on Earth at the time about 20 rounds each. And still, it took an average of 45,000 to kill one enemy soldier. Think about that. A soldier in the Pacific carried maybe 150 rounds into combat. That's his entire combat load. If the math held true, he'd need to go into battle 300 times before his bullets killed anyone. The problem wasn't the guns. American rifles were some of the best in the world. The M1 Garand could hit a target at 500 yards. But it didn't matter how good the rifle was if the man holding it couldn't bring himself to aim at another man's chest. And here's the strangest part. The soldiers who wouldn't fire weren't the problem. They were the normal ones. The men who could kill without hesitation, those were the outliers. Studies after the war found that only about 2% of soldiers were natural killers. Men who could look another human in the face and pull the trigger without thinking twice. These were the guys who racked up insane kill counts. The snipers with 300 confirmed kills, the machine gunners who mowed down entire platoons. But they were rare. Most men, even in the middle of war, couldn't overcome their basic human instinct not to murder. The military realized they had a problem. If most soldiers won't shoot, how do you win wars? So they changed training. Before World War II, soldiers practiced on bullseye targets, circles on paper. After the war, they started using human-shaped silhouettes, targets that looked like people. They taught soldiers to shoot without thinking, to react instantly when a target appeared, to dehumanize the enemy. And it worked. By the time the Vietnam War came around, the firing rate had jumped to over 90%. Nearly every soldier was now willing to shoot. But that created a different problem. Because killing someone, even when you're trained to do it, still destroys part of your soul. The psychological cost was enormous. Soldiers came home with what they called shell shock in World War I, battle fatigue in World War II, and PTSD today. But it wasn't just the fear of dying that broke them. It was the act of killing. Men who'd taken lives had nightmares for decades. They couldn't sleep, couldn't hold jobs, couldn't look their families in the eye. Some took their own lives, because humans aren't meant to kill each other. We're wired for cooperation, not slaughter. And when we're forced to do it, it leaves scars that never heal. So why did the United States need 45,000 rounds to kill one enemy soldier? Because most of those rounds were never meant to kill anyone. They were fired by men who couldn't bring themselves to aim, by soldiers who'd rather waste ammunition than take a life, by human beings trying desperately to survive a war without becoming monsters. And maybe, just maybe, that's not a weakness. Maybe that's the one thing about war that still gives us hope. Because if it takes 45,000 bullets to make us kill, it means we're not natural killers. It means deep down, even in the worst circumstances imaginable, most of us still choose not to murder. Even when we're told it's our duty, even when our lives depend on it. The next time someone glorifies war, tell them about the 45,000 bullets. Tell them about the soldiers who couldn't shoot. Tell them that the biggest battle in World War II wasn't against the Germans or the Japanese. It was against our own humanity. And most soldiers refuse to lose.